Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to finally be doing my first wrap-up of this year. As usual with my wrap-ups, I'm going to be doing them in chunks of books this year, so instead of doing my January wrap-up, my February wrap-up, I'll just be doing the first 10 books that I read, the second 5 books that I read, whenever I feel like doing it. This one is going to contain books or comics 1 through 10 that I read in 2019, and this is where I do mini quick reviews of all the books that I've read. They're not super in-depth. If I've done a more in-depth review of a book, I'll leave it linked and you can check them out if you want. So let's get started. The first thing that I picked up this year is The Wicked and the Divine Volume 5 by a whole slew of people. This one is called The Imperial Phase Part 1. This is a comic book series that used to be super popular on BookTube, but I don't think a ton of people are reading it nowadays. I love the art. It has really bold lines. It has really vibrant colors, which is something that I enjoy in comics. This one is a little bit different because they had guest writers come in and do little articles on the different gods. So one of the people that is a guest writer, one person that wrote one of the articles, is Mary H.K. Choi, who wrote Emergency Contact, which is a pretty popular book. And all the people that are guest writers in this are actually journalists. So it made sense that they would be writing journal articles and stuff like that. But I did really enjoy this one. If you guys don't know, in this comic book series, every 90 years, 12 gods are reincarnated in the bodies of young people. So you could just be living your life and then randomly you become a god. For at max 2 years, all of these gods party it up and live really ostentatious lives, and before 2 years is up, they all die. There's obviously a lot more stuff that starts to go on because this is volume 5. Again, I have been enjoying it. I worry that this series might soon start becoming a little too ridiculous, a little bit too unbelievable to really enjoy anymore. So we'll see. I have volume 6, so I'm planning on picking that one up soon, but I hope that this comic book series wraps up soon because I don't know, I just don't want it to overstay its welcome, and I've enjoyed it so far. I just think that it needs to kind of like tie everything up soon. We'll see. I ended up giving the 5th volume 4 stars. I gave a lot of 4 stars in this wrap up. Next up, I picked up Descender Volume 3 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. This is another comic book series that's pretty popular on BookTube, especially in the SFF community of BookTube. It follows this little robot called Tim21. This little robot has woken up after robots had tried to take over the universe, I guess, and had failed. Regular people, like biological people, have been trying to kill off all of these robots, and Tim21 has now reawoken and has to figure out what's going on. He's trying to find the family that he had once served, and the Tim series of robots, this is Tim22, have similarities to these giant robots that try to take over the world, so they're trying to figure everything out. This volume particularly has a lot of backstory for the characters, which I always love getting characters' backstories. I love finding out what happens to them before the start of the book. It just makes me really get invested in their characters because I understand the motivations behind their actions. This comic book series also is very watercolor, so there isn't a whole lot of detail in the backgrounds of the panels. It's such a just different vibe than most comic books. Like The Wicked and the Divine is very bold, very clear lines, and these are more blurry, as you can see. But again, I've been really enjoying this one as well. I definitely want to continue with this. I gave this volume 4 stars as well. Volumes where you get the background of the characters are like always my favorite. I'm actually gonna break what I usually do. I usually talk about each book in the exact order that I read it, but in this one I read 2 books in a series, so I'm just going to talk about them together. I reread A World Without Heroes and The Seeds of Rebellion, both by Brandon Mull. These are books 1 and 2 in the Beyonders trilogy, which is my favorite trilogy that he's written. Scratch that, it's my favorite series that he's written. I'm just gonna hold up the first one. It follows this boy named Jason. At the beginning of the book, he's living in Colorado. He is a baseball player and he's volunteering at the zoo. While he's volunteering, he ends up falling into the hippopotamus tank. He goes through the mouth of the hippopotamus and ends up in Lyrian, which is this portal fantasy world. Jason has to try to save Lyrian because that puts him in the best position to figure out a way to get back home. It also follows a girl named Rachel who at the same time as Jason also goes to Lyrian, and they team up and they're working to try to save Lyrian. I really love this series. I definitely recommend it to middle grade readers. It's one of the books that I talked about in my middle grade Rex for Boys or something like that. It's definitely a very fun adventure quest story, especially this first book, because they're trying to go around and they're trying to collect these different syllables to a word that will destroy the tyrant that's ruled over Lyrian for a very long time. And when I was rereading them, I actually ended up kind of switching my ratings. I ended up leaving them the same on Goodreads, but this one I actually liked a little bit better than this one. So I don't know, that was really weird. I ended up rating this one higher when I first went through it, but this one was so much fun. I just really enjoyed it. I think one of my favorite things about this series is that there are so many different types of beings in this world. Wizards have made different beings, so there are beings that are very short-lived. You meet them in this one. Their whole life cycle happens in like 2 years or something, so they have a lot of generations in the span of one human lifetime. There are people that are reborn every single time that they die, as long as this seed in the back of their head is intact and gets planted. There's just a whole bunch of different types of people, and I just really love this series. It's really just pure fun for me, and I really enjoyed going back and rereading these first 2 books. I plan on rereading the 3rd one, but I'll have to talk about that in some other wrap-up. The only thing going back through is that I think that the 2nd book had a little bit of middle book syndrome, where they're just moving the characters from here to here just so that they're ready for book 3. So know that if you're gonna go into this, that the 2nd book is a little middle book syndrome. You do meet a lot more characters, and the 2nd book ends very just like, boom, ending. 3rd book. So there isn't a whole lot of catharsis after finishing the 2nd book like there was when you finished the 1st one. So I think overall that the 1st one is a little bit better than the 2nd one, but I still really enjoy this series a lot. Definitely recommend it. I actually did a review of the 1st book, so if you want to check it out, I'll leave that up in the card symbol. Let's move on. After reading A World Without Heroes, I picked up The Hero's Apprentice by Travis Howe. This is the first book in the Animal Control trilogy. I actually did an individual review of this as well, and I'll leave that up in the card symbol if you want to check it out. But this book is described as Zootopia blended with, I think it's described as with The Incredibles, but I think it's more like My Hero Academia. The main character's name is Jack Roberts, and he just wants to be a part of Animal Control, which is this super-powered body that is like the police force of this world. His childhood hero, his name is King, ends up dying at the very beginning of the 1st book because Jack Roberts needed to be rescued. The whole book is Jack trying to be a part of Animal Control and solving all of these different plots. That's not a very good description of what it is, but it is super fun. I really enjoyed it. I really liked learning about all the different characters' powers and seeing them go on their different adventures and trying to beat the bad guy, really. It's been quite a while since I read this, so I don't want to go into spoilers right here. So if you want to know more, check out that review, but I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. It's a fun middle grade romp, and I do recommend it. After that, I listened to Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. This is a book that's more targeted towards like business people. This book is really for people that are higher up in businesses, like managers or people making big decisions within companies, CEOs, stuff like that. This book is also more like a distillation of all of her other books and all of her other research ideas, and all packed into one. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for all of her books, if you wanted to do it that way. I forgot to mention that Brene Brown is a shame researcher, and then everything that is kind of connected with shame, like courage and all of that stuff. She does these self-help books as well as TED Talks that I've really enjoyed. I think I've read 3 books by her already. So when going into this one, I didn't really know what to expect. I just want to read everything that she's written. When I looked up other reviews of this book, a lot of people criticize her as like selling out because she targets this book towards other people that are higher up in businesses. Like, she is the CEO of her company and she does all of these things, and she's talking in this book about applying her own principles within her own practice, as well as helping other people kind of change their work environments to better facilitate efficiency, and as well as just having a healthy work environment. I think that this book does that very well. I think that people that are in charge of businesses, CEOs, managers, stuff like that will be able to apply a lot of the things that she's talking about in this book, and I think that they'll be able to understand it very well. As just a regular person reading this book, I don't think that I'm the target audience, and I recognize that. I don't think I recommend it just for everyday people that are just wanting a self-help book, because it is so targeted towards businesses. A lot of what she talks about in this book is talked about in her other books, so I actually recommend going back to her first published book and then reading through them, and maybe just skip Dare to Lead, because she just repeats a lot of the same things that she's talked about in other books. So I don't know, I ended up enjoying it because I recognized who it was for and enjoyed it for that purpose. Not that I'm high up in any company or anything like that, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that it's really good. I actually did give this book to someone that I know that's a manager of a business, and he said that it's really, really helpful, and he's actually already applied some of the things that are in that book. So I was like, yeah, awesome. So yeah, it's one of those mixed things where it's good, just not like good for everyone. So I ended up giving it 4 stars, but that's like got an asterisk, and it's just not for everyone. The next thing that I read in 2019 is My Brother's Husband Volume 1 by Gengoro Tagami. This one follows, I forgot his name already. This one follows these two people. They're living in Japan, and then one day his late twin brother's husband, Mike, comes to Japan to get to know them and visit Japan and everything like that. But it's very weird because they don't actually know each other at all. They've never met or anything like that. So it's about them meeting for the first time, getting to know each other, and getting to know his husband and his brother through the other person's eyes, if that makes sense. It also tackles very basic things about the differences between Japanese and American, no, not American, he's Canadian, culture when it comes to treating LGBT plus people, especially gay men. I think that this book does a good job of laying out the basics of those things. I saw some criticisms about this manga that it doesn't go far enough, like it's just very surface layer, and I think that that's what it's meant to be. Like, it is supposed to be like just the basics and introducing people to these concepts. I don't think that it was supposed to go farther than that. So I enjoyed it for like just the lighthearted, wonderful story of just this family unit kind of healing after the death of his husband and his brother. I actually ended up really, really enjoying this. I love all of these characters. What is her name? I can't remember all their names. Kana is the cutest little bean. I freaking love Kana, and I love her and Mike's relationship. So I definitely recommend this. One thing that I will say that kept me from giving it 5 stars is that this author, this mangaka, I think that he normally does very adult manga that has a lot of like sexy times in it. So he couldn't resist putting in a couple of like weird panels. Let me show you. Because it's not like totally gross or anything like that, but it's just like, why is this in this lighthearted, fun family story? He just can't help himself from drawing like almost naked men. I enjoyed the rest of the story immensely. I actually have finished this duology. It's just 2 volumes, so I will be doing a review of it soon, like an individual review, but I haven't filmed it yet. So that'll be coming at some point. I just don't know exactly when. Definitely recommend this one as well. Next up, I read Crown of Feathers by Nikki Palpretto. This is a YA fantasy debut that follows 4 characters. I would say that the main character is Veronica. She and her sister Val are scouring the country trying to find phoenix eggs because they are able to become phoenix riders. In this world, there's 2 different types of magic. There's animages who are able to talk to animals. You have to have that magic to be able to become a phoenix rider because you have to be able to communicate with the phoenix. And then there are also shadow mages, which means that you can meddle with people's minds and stuff like that. Kind of like the realm of the elderlings, wit and skill. The main characters, Veronica and Val, have both. They can talk to animals and they can meddle with people's minds. Then you also follow 2 other characters. Tristan, who is a phoenix rider, but he's afraid of fire, which causes problems because phoenixes are fire creatures. And then the other one is a boy named Sev, who has been conscripted and is trying to hide his animage powers. And then it's just them being huge messes and following all the drama that unfolds during this. I did an individual book review for this, so I'll leave that up in the card symbol if you want to check it out. But I think that this book has a lot of promise. I enjoyed a lot of the drama, tension things going on in this. The first like 100 pages are hard to get through. It's like a huge info dump and you're like, whoa, this is a lot of information that I don't need right now and doesn't make any sense for where it's put. And I don't know, I just was not a huge fan of the first, maybe it's only the first 70 pages, something like that. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people complain about the very beginning of this book because it's just like, info! The book review that I did is non-spoiler, so I definitely recommend checking that out if you want to know more of my specific thoughts, because this video is already pretty long. But I did enjoy it, just not as much as I was hoping to. I ended up giving this like 3.5 stars. I think in my review I said 4, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's more like a 3.5. But I will be continuing. I think that it's really fun. I am invested in the characters now. I just don't think that it's anything mind-blowing. It doesn't shock you at all. You definitely know what's gonna happen, but it's a fun time, so I enjoyed it. After that, I picked up and read Other Voices, Other Rooms by Truman Capote. This is a 1940-something Southern Gothic novel about a boy named Joel Knox, and at the beginning of the book he gets a letter from his estranged father summoning him to this southern plantation home. And so Joel goes and tries to find his father and meets all of these strange people that are living in this mansion. It's a story about reconciling like expectation versus reality, as well as accepting aspects of your life. This book is described as semi-autobiographical, so Joel Knox, the main character, has a lot of similarities to Truman Capote, and it's how Truman Capote kind of viewed himself as a child. He's very effeminate, he has a hard time accepting himself, he has a bad relationship with his father, mainly just that he has a non-existent relationship with his father. So I enjoyed this book because it had all of those similarities, and it was interesting to see how Truman Capote viewed himself as a child and viewed his situation. He described writing this book as exorcising some demons, and so for that I think that the book was really interesting, but I didn't end up really liking this book very much. I did a review for this book and I'll leave that up in the card symbol. I might have used all my cards, so if not, I'll leave it linked down in the description. And in there I end up basically going into spoilers. At first I didn't think that I made it spoiler, but yeah, I definitely talk about spoilers. And a lot of the things I didn't particularly love in this are because of things that happen later on, so it's hard to talk about why I didn't love it without going into those details. One of the things that I can talk about without spoiling things is that I think that the writing was overly descriptive. Truman Capote has a really descriptive writing style. I've read In Cold Blood by him, and it was the same way. It's very, very detailed, and in Cold Blood, I kind of appreciated how much detail was in there, because In Cold Blood is supposed to be a true crime novel. Well, it is a true crime novel, but it was supposed to be a non-fiction novel, but there's a lot of fictionalized things in there. So all the detail made it seem more real. In this, a lot of the detail I liked at the beginning because it really sets up this very eerie mansion feeling, and it really gets you the feelings of what the characters are going through, stuff like that. But as the novel progressed, I wanted less and less of those details because I wanted more and more things to happen. I was like, get going, let's get some stuff going. But it's just very slowed down because of the detailed writing. And I also recognized that this novel, for its time period, was like amazingly progressive and everything like that, but some of the messages that are with accepting your sexuality and stuff like that, I didn't think that they were necessarily the healthiest messages, or I don't know, I just didn't love it. So I ended up giving this book like 2.5 stars. If you want to know more, check out that review. I then finally read The Changeling by Victor Lavelle. I actually listened to this as an audiobook and flipped through this and read it at the same time. The audiobook is done by the author and he does a fantastic job, so I definitely recommend that. This one follows a character named Apollo Kagwa. He's an extremely hardworking new father. He and his wife have just had their first child. He works extremely hard to try to provide for them, and his wife Emma is also working. For the first 20% of this book, because I was listening to it on audio for the first little while, it's very similar to just a contemporary novel about a couple having a baby and just going through their daily lives. But then once it hits that 20%, stuff starts to get weird. I just checked out the blurb to make sure I'm not spoiling anything, but what ends up happening is that Emma commits a horrific act beyond any parent's comprehension, and then Apollo is left to try to pick up the pieces as well as figure out why Emma would do this, where Emma is now because she's disappeared. It's a fantasy book, so as the book goes along, more and more fantasy aspects come to light. I don't know how to describe it. Actually, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to leave a link to Emily from Possibly Literate's review down in the description because she talks about this book way better than I think that I can do here. She's the one who initially convinced me to read this book, and I'm glad that I did. I did really enjoy it, but it's really hard to describe without going into spoilers. I mean, it's called The Changeling. I mean, I feel like that kind of tells you what it's about. But I really did enjoy watching Apollo's journey of addressing these different terrible things that have happened and trying to reconcile them with the person that he knew. Yeah, I don't know. I just really enjoyed it. I don't know how to describe it. It's very hard to describe. It's a standalone, which is really nice. So it's a one and done deal. I'm just gonna leave it there. I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm going to pick up more from this author because I think that he's really, really good. And he's actually a really good narrator as well. So recommend the audiobook too. Let me know if you've read this book and what your thoughts were because it's kind of weird, but I enjoyed it. That's the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video because I already talked about The Seeds of Rebellion, which was the 10th book that I read in 2019. So those are all the books that I'm going to talk about. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read any of these books, especially if you've read The Changeling because I was having such a hard time talking about that. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.